Good evening to all. It is my pleasure and honor to welcome you to the first ever Polish-Slovak debate in the history of political theology. It's quite a paradox that Poles and Slovak meet to discuss Central Europe in English. We meet today more than 6 months after the outbreak of war in Ukraine, which has shaken Europe and provided a pretext to reflect on the new balance on our continent. For the first time since the collapse of Soviet Union, the political distinctiveness of our region has been so clearly formulated. The specificity of Central Europe, which has its own separate interests, visions of politicality and image of the future of Europe. All this leads us to ask anew the question about the place of our region on the political and spiritual map of Europe and the mission that Bratislava and Warsaw will play in it. I would like to introduce our honorable guests today. We are hosting Mr. Juraj Šúst, the publicist, philosopher, president of Ladislav Hanusa Society, organizer of Hanus Days, editor-in-chief of Verbum, a Slovak journal on contemporary Christian culture. And our second guest is Paweł Ukielski, political scientist, historian, expert on Central European issues, and deputy director of Warsaw Uprising Museum. I would like also to express our gratitude for our donors and readers of political theology and the blog press team who will be making our YouTube broadcast available this evening. My first question, our discussion, I would like to start with the question that is connected to the text that we have published today, the political manifesto of 2 Slovak intellectuals entitled Changing Slovak Doctrine, Why We Should Stick to Poland in New Era. Martin Hanus and Józef Majchrak have expressed their view that orientation to Germany that was typical for Slovak politics for last 10 years after the outbreak of war in Ukraine has proven to be a failure. Germany had to be a guarantee of stability and security in Europe, and it has proven that it is not. And in their text, these 2 Slovak intellectuals propose a turn towards Warsaw that have been constructing their own politics of security, energetical resources for last probably 10 years. And my question is for you, to Mr. Šúst. Do you think that this turn from Berlin to Warsaw, this turn in Slovakia, this is some kind of possible perspective for Slovakia?
Well, let's think about it. I'm not an expert on foreign policy, so it will be thoughts of, let's say, Catholic philosopher about this issue. First of all, it's a opportunity right now to stick closer to Poland, because German foreign policy in current months showed to be catastrophe, even though from pragmatic perspective. They were building a pipe, Nord Stream, even after 2014, and they cannot use it now. It is politically, economically, but I think also morally catastrophe. They sacrificed us. Actually, they were prepared to do it. From this perspective, it's reasonable for us to look somewhere else. And where should we look for then, not to Poland? There are many similar, let's say, issues. I don't want to say interests, but the culture, it's very similar. If Poland is the most Catholic culture in Europe, then the Slovakia is the second one. Well, even though secularization proceeds in Poland as well as in Slovakia, but still, the Catholicism has strong presence in Slovakia. Experience with communism, it's very important. Also, we share this experience together. Then what else? Immigration policies. Well, we share this. We share general view on moral ethical issues like marriage, family, the need to do something with demography. We share all of this, and I think we share also interest about Ukraine, and it would be very nice if we could integrate in future Ukraine to Europe according to Central European experience, and Ukraine could be our allies of Central Europe, then ally of Western Europe, hopefully. If we, well, I think thanks to Poland, maybe this might be realistic. So I think these are common goals, common interests. But to be honest, there is maybe one difference, and it's also a difference between Poland and Slovakia. Well, we are not warriors, actually, and
Slovakia is not very...
not soldiers. We are more like hobbits than Gondor fighters, if I can use this example from Tolkien. And we are a bit worried or ask a lot of questions when we see Poland preparing for war with Russia. At least it seems us from our view. We somehow got used to count with others to protect us, and we see that Poland wants to protect itself. But it's also quite dangerous. And well, we ask question where it comes finally, and if military involvement of Poland and other European countries will bring freedom of Ukraine or escalation of war.
There is a kind of a debate in Slovakia about arming Ukraine, and is it a responsible approach?
This debate is about conservative people. Our political elites goes with European Union, and we have no difference in general. Central European attitude towards Ukraine, it's the same as in Poland.
But Mr. Ukielski would like to add something about this possible turn from Berlin to Warsaw in Bratislava?
Yes, maybe a little bit different perspective, geopolitical or internationally political one. So first of all, I wouldn't overestimate one text in conservative on the conservative popular, but one of many websites, and this is of course quite strong voice, strong manifesto. I would say that Postoj was always much more pro-Polish than average in Slovakia, I would say, in political terms, because I don't mean interpersonal relations. But of course, this is manifesto that shows that something happens in Europe. So Slovakia which was not very active in international politics for last decades, now is at least thinking about what to do next in changing situation. So your question, in fact, raises a lot of new questions for the future. What lessons will be learned about current situation? What conclusions will be drawn? And of course, it is not only about Slovakia itself, but also in Germany, in Poland, what policy will be led for future months, years. Because yes, we clearly see that German policy failed. German position in the global politics, but also within European Union, is weaker than it was a year ago. But still it is strong position. The question is what will happen later. Of course, Polish position, we can see that Polish position was raised after 24th of February. The question is for Polish politicians, will they use the opportunity or not? Poland for many years was interested to be a kind of Central European leader, but it never happened so far, in fact. The question is whether this window of opportunity will be open and will be used by Polish politicians. What offer Poland would have for Central Europe? There were many attempts. The last one is 3Cs initiative, which is developing. So the question is, what will happen in the coming months and years? We can see clearly that Poland can be a leader and maybe can have better offer, at least in some fields, than Germany even. And this is the question: if Poland could use this opportunity.
You've mentioned that this is just one article, so I would like ask Mr. Šúst, how do you consider the general audience opinion on this feeling of disenchantment of German politics? Is there a feeling of being let down by the stance of Germany? And is a common Slovak looking without any fear at the position of Warsaw that is trying to be like a kind of a Central European leader?
Well, it depends on, of course, on kind of ideological background of Slovak media. Of course, the liberal media don't show much sympathy towards Poland, of course. And conservative media generally show very much sympathy, even though now, as I said, conservative people are, let's say, divided about what is a realistic reaction on Russian aggression and what really helps. But generally, conservative Slovakia is very supported towards closer cooperation with Poland. Regarding Germany, the liberals are, I would say they don't know what to think. Actually, Germany was their hero. Angela Merkel was kind of liberal superstars, and now they are quiet. They don't know what to say.
So, Mr. Ukielski, would you like to add something? No, okay, so let's take a small trip to the West and let's recall the words of Ursula von der Leyen, which in one of the last speeches have mentioned that the West should have listened to its neighbors from Central Europe, that our experience of communism, our experience of historical forms of politicality of Russia should have been heard in Western Europe. On the other hand, we have one of this really not popular speeches, not popular in Poland, of Emmanuel Macron, who have mentioned about this warmongering nations, of course, meaning among others, Poland. Gentlemen, how do you think this rediscovering of Central Europe on the West, is it going to be some kind of a deep process of rethinking about our identity, our way of thinking about the East, or it is something like peculiar, just specific for this short amount of time that we are experiencing now?
I'm a bit skeptical that Western Europe is refiguring its stance towards Central and Eastern Europe. We had the conservative summit in Bratislava on Monday, and there were people from several Central European countries, and all of them shared the common attitude, feeling like second class in European and Brussels institutions. So, when we see discussions in, let's say, in Germany, it seems to me it's closed to themselves to speak about Green Deal, energy crisis, and all of this. From their point of view, they don't care too much about us, I would say.
Well, I would say you are right to some extent, but again, I will return to the window of opportunity. This is a moment when we can change, of course, not completely, but at least a little bit change attitude towards Central Europe. Of course, Westerners, especially now France, because Germans are a little bit nervous about what happened and their position, and they are at least trying to think what really happened and why their policy failed. France has no such reflection. Of course, again, this is question how we use this window of opportunity. But what is most important? Let's say they discover Central Europe, but the most important is that they discover Ukraine. This is real change. And I would say that Ukraine is now finally gaining its place in imaginarium of Western Europe. So far, it was a little bit different Russia. So this is the most important change. The second step, and it comes from Ukraine, is that they discover that Central Europe has something to say, and sometimes what it has to say is not so stupid. Wow. It is not just Russophobia. It's realistic approach. So Wandel durch Handel was not realistic approach. It was naive. And our naive and Russophobic approach proved to be realpolitik. So this is something that changes a little bit. We'll see what will happen in the long-term time. But there is another very important factor that gives us at least a little bit optimism. We are discussing German or French approach, but Germany and France are not the only Western countries. Their approach is different not only from Polish, Slovak, Czech, Baltic states approach, or Romania's approach, but also Scandinavia, but also British, American. And this is very deep difference, I would say, on the level of political philosophy. Central Europe, Scandinavia, Anglo-Saxon countries believe that they did everything to avoid the war, but once it happened, we have to win. German or French approach is war is total evil, so we have to do everything to stop it. This is totally different approach, not to win it, to stop it. And well, so far, mostly because of American involvement, it is our, and also approach of Ukrainians, of course, it is our approach that is stronger. We'll see what will happen in the winter. But I'm a little rather optimistic about that, because for Americans it is very important to have the situation cleared to turn into China again.
And we've mentioned the difference between the Anglo-Saxon West and continental West. I think that in general here in Poland we look with hope at closing ties with Great Britain, with USA. And how does it look in Slovakia? How does it look from a perspective of Slovakian conservative? Do you see that the greater presence of American interests, American army, American military is an opportunity for Slovakia, for Central Europe and Slovakia as a part of it? Or do you look at it with some kind of fear of presupposition?
I think it's complicated, and good arguments are on both sides, I would say. Well, the skeptics show examples of last American involvements around the world, and it's quite catastrophic in certain sense. In Iraq, Middle East, Afghanistan, when we count, the United States under Biden government are one of the most exporters of progressivism in the globe. So, I would say that there are good reasons to be worried about what really America will do in close horizon, and also America is divided itself in whether it should continue in its international politics or should concern more about its domestic politics and its own continent. So, let's say the good argument is that, well, as you said, a window of opportunity is that maybe with the help of United States, the Central Europe could gain more importance in Europe and more balance the division of European power, which so far was too much on the side of Germany and France. But maybe one more thought and question. When you said that Central Europe and Baltic states, Central Europe except Hungary, think that we have to win this war. I would say it is true, but we need to be honest and say that without the Americans, we wouldn't be so sure if we are able to win this war.
Mr. Ukielski, do you think that among Central European nations, the Poles are the most pro-American in their stance? That we are the only ones who look at United States with this feeling that there is no alternative for their presence?
Definitely, we are one of the most pro-American. I wouldn't say that the most. Romanians are at least on the same level of pro-Americanness. So I think that Baltics are also quite strongly pro-American. So well, I think it will also be changing now. So this pro-Americanness will be rather growing because of what is happening on Ukraine, because it is clearly visible, as you said, that it is America who gives this security really. So they managed to support Ukraine to that extent that Russians not only did not conquer Kiev, but also did not conquer Kharkiv, etc., etc. So, and they helped with the counteroffensive now. So, I would say that probably in the nearest future, those pro-American feelings will be growing, even though in some countries like Slovakia, there is, for last decades, there was skepticism towards United States much stronger than in Poland.
And maybe it's time to stop discussing the perspective of the West on Central Europe. Maybe it's time to ask about the similarities and differences between us, between Poles and Slovaks. The thing that is concerning me is how did Slovakia manage to go through this painful process that we call post-communist transformation? Because of course we had similar problems at the beginning of the 90s. Like we had this erosion of our own capital, the oligarchization of politics and economy, the presence of Russian agenda and Russian interest. How did Slovaks cope with this traditional problems of post-communist transformation to build their modern state?
Well, I would say in one important aspect it was similar as in Poland. First 20 years we looked to the West and wanted to imitate the West in everything. To catch up the West was the most important thing. And well, we didn't reflect much about our own destiny, our own history, culture, about how can we in new era be subject of history. And I think this was similar in Poland. The difference was that you in Poland reflected this much more than we did. And in Slovakia. So
you mean that there is no critical discourse about what happened in the early 90s in Slovakia? Like you do not...
Not not much. A few of my friends, we read your discourse actually. We read about Legutko, Karlovic, Čikotsky, and about this thinking, but we don't have a similar discourse in Slovakia so far. But there is one maybe a bit peculiar thing in Slovak experience. In transformation period, and this peculiar thing is that we have this kind of paradox that Slovak Catholics in politics in the 90s were allies with liberals against nationalists who were allies with post-communists.
This is quite paradoxical for us in Poland. Maybe not now, but 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah. So, to be very brief, the Slovakia was the modern state was established in 1993 under the government of these nationalists and post-communists, and it showed up to be catastrophe economically and also morally. It was vulgar, corrupted government in all kind of corruptions you can imagine, and this was one of the reasons, I think, that why Catholics in politics, represented by Christian democratic movement, didn't cooperate with nationalists. Well, they cooperated with liberals, and they had aim to catch up Europe, which seemed to be in the 90s that it is far away before us, and also our neighboring countries are more in the West than we were at that time. So they joined liberals, and they thought we together can catch up this train, and they succeeded. These Catholic politicians thought that they will somehow manage to mitigate the influence of liberalism to Slovak society, and in certain terms they were successful in politics. For example, we have a definition of marriage as man and woman in our constitution. Our parliament voted for kind of moral, cultural independence of Slovakia. However, they were not successful in stopping or even changing the secularization tendencies of Slovak society. And now, after 30 years of modern Slovakia, the Catholic politics is in the big crisis ever. We have Catholic politicians, but we don't have conservative party. I mean, cultural normal conservative party, not the vulgar ones. We have several vulgar so-called conservative parties, but not kind of decent conservative party. This is a big problem because we see the trends in Hungary and Poland, and we see that there is window of opportunity for kind of national conservatism also in Slovakia, but it's not easy for us.
Yes, the major difference between Poland and Slovakia in the transition period, as researchers like to call it, is that Slovakia became an independent country in 1993 and had to build its statehood from the beginning, in fact, with very little tradition of statehood before. So I would say that it was also a little bit different starting point. Of course, in terms of communism, economy, etc., it was similar or even better starting point. I mean economy, but from the idea of statehood, it was different point. And this is the major difference I would spotlight here. Which means you mentioned that it was this driving towards the West. But you also mentioned the times of Vladimir Mečiar, when it was not completely like this, because Mečiar was, well, he wanted to keep the full power, and going towards the West would limit him. That's why he did not decide to go fully to the West, to obey the rules, etc., etc. Therefore, he turned towards even Russia those days. Several months ago, we heard that Slovakia was giving this missile system S-300, former Soviet or Russian system, to Ukraine to support it. When it was bought from Russia, it was bought in 1997. So, of course, after the time of Mečiarism, common coalition of conservatives and liberals, and also post-communists, in fact, all of them gathered together to move towards West, to catch up to other Visegrad countries, to European Union, NATO, etc., etc. So there was this turbulence in 1990s, and if Mečiar, there was a fear that if Mečiar was not deprived of power in 1998, he could become a kind of Lukashenko. I think it was a little bit overestimated fear, even those days, but it was expressed in late 90s. So there are differences in between Poland and Slovakia in this transition period, and they are also meaningful. But of course, there are many similarities, like in I don't know, economic transition, lack of capital, etc., etc., privatization. There were similar problems.
There are two questions that just come up to me. One is that it's. Would you agree with this notion about lack of statehood, lack of political traditions and intellectuals in Slovakia? And would you say that Ladislav Hanus Society is a kind of a response for this problem? And the second question for Mr. Ukielski is, this is quite a surprise for me to hear that there is no tradition of critical reflection on transformation in Slovakia, and that Slovak intellectuals are reading Polish intellectuals. And would you say that, surprisingly, that Polish reflection, critical reflection of post-communist transformation could be a part of Polish soft power in Central Europe? So maybe Mr. Šúst at the beginning.
The question was
about the lack of statehood, political
yes,
traditions,
okay.
and Ladislav Hanus Society.
Yes. Yes, I agree. I think it was a kind of mistake of so-called decent conservatives who were not prepared to start independent Slovakia in 90 or 91, 92, and let this thing for vulgar nationalist of Mečiar kind. Well, so I think this is true. Part of this problem is historical. During the Second World War, there was independent Slovakia. It was kind of authoritarian Catholic regime who was ally of Germany, with all the consequences for us, with about 70,000 Jews exported to concentration camps in Birkenau. well.
So this is not exactly a good tradition to look up to.
Exactly. And this kind of paralyzed Catholic politicians in early 90s to be more or fully Catholic or conservative in public life. They wanted to avoid to be named as fascists and so on. Well, I would say what we can do now, when we don't have political elites, we need to do what we can, and we can try to recover culture, Catholic culture in Slovak, Catholic intellectual culture, and that's the place of Ladislav Hanus fellowship. Yes, and I think we need to do it maybe not only in Slovakia but also in other European countries, because I would say the crisis in European Union has many forms, but I would say that one of the most deep crises, or most deep cause of present crisis is that Europe abandoned Christendom and Christian roots of societies, and well, we need to recover. It's not easy. Our region of Central Europe has many discontinuities, especially in 20th century. We started as monarchy and ended, well, almost like, as you said, Belarus regime under Mečiar's government. So I would say it's realistic to say that, well, we lost much of our tradition, and we need to recover, but not just to recover it, we need to develop it in our modern ways of 21st century. So I would say it's a very, very big, huge task, and well, there is a lot of work on this field.
I agree that Polish intellectual thought of last decades can be our soft power, especially in Central Europe. But today we see that it could spread even to the West, because, well, Westerners realized what we discussed in the beginning. Hey, it was them who was right. Maybe it is worth to read them, to listen to them. I'm not very optimistic, because intellectuals, most of intellectuals in Germany or in France feel best just in their environment, but still, at least in some circles, it could have an impact. So, returning to the question about this criticism towards some solutions taken or measures taken in this transition period, I would say that for intellectuals, it was in 90s, it was quite a big bravery to criticize. And maybe this is why this criticism was the strongest, I mean, on this intellectual level, not because Mečiar was also from this idea to criticize the economic transition. But on this intellectual level, it was quite a big bravery to criticize in 1990s the way the transition was made. And probably because Polish, I would say, Polish opposition in 70s and 80s was the strongest and had numerous intellectual waves, maybe this is why it could have happened here, that there was criticism on different levels. So from total criticism through criticism towards some solutions to total support to every solution done. So yes, I believe that this intellectual strength and huge variety of intellectual trends in Poland could be our soft power.
Mr. Šúst, would you like to add something?
I think you don't mean like this, but I don't think it's a good term to use, soft power, in connection with philosophy, even political philosophy. I would say it's maybe one of the most biggest dangers for Poland. I would say the window of opportunity for Poland is to search for a common good with other Central Eastern European countries, not to show its own dominance over this region, because, well, I would say the smaller countries are always a little bit afraid of the bigger ones, and well, they might be a little bit afraid even of Poland. So I would say the justice is the virtue of the stronger, and I hope that you will prove this.
I think that the term soft power is not explicitly implying the dominance, rather some kind of inspiration and this kind of influence. But let's get back to, if we are talking about building intellectual life, let's get back to your organization, to Ladislav Hanus Society, which you are one of main founders. Would you like to share with us something more about your organization, because you are famous in Slovakia for organizing debates, for organizing seminars. What's like the root forms of activity of Ladislav Hanus Society? What's their agenda? What are you bringing to the political and intellectual table in Slovakia?
Thank you. It's a pleasure to answer the questions like this. Maybe you will find there some similarities with this organization, Teologia, Polityczna. First, we try to educate the new generations, and we offer several programs in let's say Christian culture, history, theology, political philosophy, for students, young professionals, in order to be more competent to be present in public life and in culture in Slovakia. So this is the first thing. Then we try to be present in Slovak culture and to somehow put the Christian or Catholic content to Slovak mainstream culture. So we organize intellectual festivals in two largest Slovak cities, Bratislava and Košice. And we tried to invite important thinkers around the world. And I think that this is quite successful project, and every every student in Slovakia with the minimum intellectual interests know about this festival and seen some of its contents. Well, then it was inspiration from here. Teologia Polityczna. We started to publish our own magazine. Well, it's important to develop the, let's say, modern Catholic political and cultural thought. For you, it's normal. For us, it's the new thing.
It wasn't normal, but at the beginning.
Well, so we started to do it and publish our own journal, and we tried to call young generation to write and to think and to read others and to think about ideas in our own Slovak context and in context of Central Europe. And our last thing is to organize conservative summit. Well, we don't have, as I said, let's say, conservative elite. Our most of our more or less conservative politicians from Catholic cultural background, well, are not, if I can say, statements. So we want to somehow encourage them with examples from abroad, also from Poland, from Hungary, Czech Republic, United States, other countries. So we started to organize this, and we want to somehow help to form the new Slovak conservative elites in, let's say, near future, hopefully. And also one more thing, we would like this Slovak conservative elite cooperate with conservative elite in Central Europe and elsewhere.
It's a pleasure to hear that political theology, Teologia Polityczna, was one of the inspirations for Ladislav Hanus society, and this somehow falsifies, this somehow show that this idea that Poland and Slovakia are two neighbors with their backs turned at each other. This is a sentence that is somehow used to describe the relation between Slovakia and Poland. This shows that we are not so much turned with our backs to each other, but this is quite not a common thing to happen, this kind of inspiration between Poland and Slovakia. Mr. Ukielski, what's your notion, what's your idea on this, that since the last 30 years we were so much, to some extent maybe, inspired or interested in Czech culture, but not Slovak in Poland?
Well, let me start with, before I answer the question, with your statement. Yes, of course, this is exactly what I was saying in the beginning, that Poland has to have a good offer, to use the window of opportunity. It was, I don't know, 12 years ago when I wrote a text criticizing Polish approach to the Central Europe. And I wrote that we have two approaches, both are false. First is that we are big enough to play in other leagues, so we will not talk with Central European small countries. And the second was that we are big, so we are interested in Central Europe, but Central Europe should be interested in cooperation or in Polish leadership because we are big, without big offer for the Central Europe. So both those approaches I perceived as bad ones. And I remember I was talking with Magda Wasariowa in 2008 or 2009. And yes, I was asking her, what about the Polish interest in Central Europe? Is there a fear in Slovakia that Poland is too strong, that would like to demonstrate its own will without taking into consideration will of smaller countries. She told me, no, we are rather afraid that Poland could be not interested in Central Europe at all. Of course, it was, I think, 2009, so it was this doctrine of Sikorski that we are playing in the bigger, higher league than Slovakia, Hungary, or Czech Republic. So maybe this was that moment. So I perfectly agree that the leader, to be a real leader, has to have a good offer and has to not to present itself as a leader, but to be considered as a leader by others. So this is total difference. Going back to your question, well, I think that this is this interest in Czech culture and this interest in Slovak culture has very deep roots. So there was interest in Czech culture for decades, and I think this is also rooted in Czechoslovak times, when everything that was from Czechoslovakia was considered Czech. So in this sense, I would say that that Slovaks were right when they wanted to have more visibility within the federation, or before it was a unitarian state. It was quite common in Poland to say that we are going to Czech Tatras. So this is the problem. Of course, it has very deep roots, also reaching probably 19th century. But well, and probably it is also that Slovakia was not successful to present its culture in Poland to that extent as Czechs were. So probably those are the reasons that Poles are more interested in Czech culture. I would say much more interested are Poles in Czech culture than Czechs in Polish culture, unfortunately. So this is also not balanced.
And you've mentioned, among other countries, the Hungary. We have not spoken today, I suppose, about Hungary. And I'm talking about this because the Visegrad project, the Visegrad Union, was one of the biggest, maybe, common hopes between Poles, Czechs, and Slovakians. And after the outbreak of war in Ukraine, we have lost Hungary. We have lost Hungary as a part of our common vision of Central Europe, of our common vision of Europe in general, and global order, I would even say. Gentlemen, do you believe that there is any hope, there is any possibility, and close future to get back Hungary to the Visegrad project, to Visegrad Union, to idea of common Central Europe?
Well, I would say that we are not in position not to cooperate in this region. We still have, or we still share a lot of cultural similarities, and even respect to Christianity, and this is quite rare in Europe, and well, I think we should develop this heritage, despite the fact that Hungary doesn't share the view of rest of Central Europe regarding Russian aggression. I would say that we shouldn't be too harsh on Hungary. We should criticize Hungary if it seems that they are too more pragmatic, maybe kind of selfish than they should be. But still, maybe also the realistic approach might be good balance if we were too quick and fast to be somehow driven by just maybe unrealistic idealism sometimes, or heroism which is not backed by political realism. Maybe. So I would suggest cooperation, and maybe not only Visegrad countries, but also with other countries, more Eastern European countries, and maybe also with Austria. We share common heritage. It's a distinct heritage from the Western Europe, and I think that we should build on it.
I will start with the question, what is Visegrad Group for? Because I would say that for a long time there was too much expectations towards Visegrad Group, which it was never able to fulfill because of political reasons. So there was never, I underline it, there was never any idea of strong political alliance within Visegrad. Of course, in the beginning it was established to support each other on the road to NATO and European Union, and it proved to be successful in the late 90s and beginning of the new millennium, when Slovakia was a little bit behind, and Polish, Hungarian and Czech support helped Slovakia to join NATO quite quickly after Mecher's period. But taking apart this moment, it was always rather discussion forum to reach some common decisions, some common goals, and then to present it together. So
it's not a big political project, not without any vision.
Never. It was never. So of course, some ideas that Visegrad could be, I don't know, like Benelux or something. It had never strong foundations in realpolitik. So this is point number one, and therefore, I think that today's problems with Hungary, so that Hungary are rather a side of Visegrad, is, as you mentioned, it's not forever. And we had turbulences within Visegrad several times. This is point number two. The third thing is, I'm not sure whether in the end it will prove that it's Orban who is realpolitik or Poles who will be victorious in political terms in that bidding. If Orban is bidding on Russia and we are bidding on Americans, where is the realpolitik? Well, we'll see. Of course, in short term, probably he will have cheaper gas for this winter. But in political terms, in medium or longer term, I wouldn't bid on Orban that he will be winner of the situation.
I would say good reflection. I would like to add just one thing, that Orban has excellent relations with American conservatives, who might get to power very, very soon.
I think that we are heading towards the end of our moderated discussion, and there will be time for questions from the audience. But I would like to ask one more question. If we had to express a short manifesto for common goals, common mission of Slovakia and Poland, Warsaw Bratislava manifesto, like in 2 or 3 bullet points, what would you say it would contain? I know it's tricky and hard to answer right now.
I would say the most easy, it's our Christian heritage, Christian culture. This is what we want to not only protect, but to develop and to pass to other generations. So this is what we want to build our, let's say, Central Europe or even European Union, if we had power to do it. So I don't know if you agree, but it seems to me, first point, it seems to me pretty simple.
Yes, it's a very hard question, because normally intellectuals work days or weeks on manifestos, and we have just several seconds to think about it. Well, of course, I agree. I would add 2 points to that. First is security, and second is influence in Europe. To raise our influence, to be more heard, to be more a player, not just I don't know, being played by the powers.
Maybe I want one more thing. Maybe we share also the view of national subjectivity, in contrast to liberal or progressive universalism. So we want respect the freedom of nations to be subject of history. I would say this is what we learned from Poland, and I think we should build our cooperation on this.
And now we have a bit of time for questions from the audience, if there are some. Okay, if we don't have questions, I would like to finish our discussion. I would like to thank our today's guests. Juraj Šúst was with us.
Thank you.
And Paweł Ukielski. I would like to thank our donors and readers of political theology, and to all our audiences in the room and in the front of the computer screens. I would like to also express our gratitude to Blog Press, a team which was broadcasting our meeting today. And I wish you all a good evening. See you next time.